There is a page in the Book of Abramelin with holes in it. A grid of letters, ruled into little squares like a crossword. The same word reads across and down, and then, in the middle of it, empty cells. The book says that square shows a man where treasure is buried. It never says what goes in the gaps. That book built modern magic, not the Lesser Key of Solomon, not the Key of Solomon, not the Goetia, this one. A book nobody can date, a ritual nobody agrees the length of, an angel at the end of it that half the occult world has spent 100 years trying to meet. The Heretic Codex has that book open tonight. It is a letter, a German Jew named Abraham of Worms writing to his younger son, dated 1458. A journey to Egypt, an old man on the Nile, and one operation. Half a year alone in a prepared room. Prayer, morning and evening, rising. And at the end of it, the angel. Whether an angel ever arrived is not the question tonight. Hold any view of that you like. Nothing after this depends on it, because what follows is not a matter of belief. It is a matter of which copy somebody happened to be holding. The English version of this book is a translation of a late French copy. The French copy is short. The oldest German copies run the operation for 18 months. The French runs it for 6. The German squares are complete. The French squares have the holes. So the book that made all of this is a bad copy of a book nobody can date, and the bad copy is the one that worked. Hold on to the 6 and the 18. Everything tonight turns on the distance between them. Ask anybody in London in 1897 which books a serious occultist needed, and nobody names this one. It was not in English. It was a few German manuscripts in German libraries and one French copy in Paris, and the men who would have wanted it most had no idea it existed. Within 20 years, it had rearranged the whole subject. The story the book tells about itself goes like this. Abraham, son of Simon, of the city of Worms on the Rhine, 2 sons. The elder, Joseph, gets the family Kabbalah, the thing that was handed down and could be handed on. The younger, Lamech, gets this letter because there is nothing left for a second son. He went a long way to find it. Germany, Austria, then Constantinople, where a man promised him everything and delivered nothing. Egypt after that. And somewhere up the Nile, outside a town the book calls Arachi, an old Egyptian named Abramelin, living alone in the desert. Abramelin asks 2 things before he teaches anybody anything: swear to serve God, and take 10 gold florins into that town and put them in the hands of 72 poor people there. Abraham does both. He is handed 2 manuscript books and told to copy them out by hand. Then he goes home to Worms and spends the rest of his life on the operation, and on this letter, written for a boy who will never meet the old man. That is a good story. It is also the part with nothing under it. Nobody has found Arachi. Nobody has found Abraham of Worms outside his own book, and no copy of this book from the 15th century exists. Not one page. The desert, the florins, the 2 manuscript books, all of it survives only inside a document that shows up 150 years too late to prove any of it. If you want more of the grimoires and the men who copied them badly, make sure to subscribe to the Heretic Codex. Set the story aside and look at the object instead, because the object is 4 books, and the 4 do very different jobs. Book 1 is the journey. Where he went, who disappointed him, what the old man said to him in the desert. It is also where the warnings live, and the warnings are why this book acquired a reputation for being dangerous to touch. The operation cannot be started and dropped. A man who begins it and walks away part of the way through is not back where he started. He is somewhere worse. The book says that plainly and then says it again. Book 2 is the conditions. They are strange enough to be worth listing, because they are the reason a man will later buy a house in Scotland. A room set aside, a window in it, and beyond that window an open terrace, uncovered to the sky, with a door in it facing north. The terrace floor laid with fine river sand, 2 fingers deep, swept smooth so that nothing crosses it unseen. A lamp, a censer, and a start date, which is the detail that gives the whole thing away. The operation begins after Easter. A Christian date, in a book supposedly written by a 15th century German Jew for his son. That single line has done more damage to the book's own account of itself than any hostile critic ever managed, and the argument it started is still going on. Book 3 is the operation, and this is the part that is usually described as if it were a recipe. It is closer to a resignation letter. 6 months in the English version, cut into 3 stages of 2 months each. The stages are the same length. What grows inside them is the day. In the first stage, it is prayer at dawn and at sunset, alone in the room. In the second, the hours get longer and the withdrawal tightens. In the third, they get longer again, until the day has almost nothing else left in it. Picture what that means for a man with a trade and a household. The business goes to somebody else for half a year, or it closes. The family is told to stay out of one room in their own house and not to ask. Every morning the sand on that terrace is swept flat again, so that anything that crosses it will show. The lamp is lit, the door faces north, and a grown man goes in there twice a day to talk to nobody in particular, on the promise that at some point in the 6th month it stops being nobody. Then the thing the whole book exists for. The text calls it the knowledge and conversation of the holy guardian angel, and hold that phrase, because almost everybody who uses it has the second word wrong. And after the angel, the spirits. The order matters more than anything in the list. You do not go to the demons first, and you do not go to them alone. The angel comes first, and the angel is what allows a man to stand in front of the rest of them at all. 4 princes at the head of the hierarchy: Lucifer, Leviathan, Satan, and Belial. Beneath them, a second rank of 8, and that rank is full of names anybody who watches horror films has heard. Astaroth, Beelzebub, Amaimon, Paimon, the name a boy gets crowned with at the end of Hereditary, and already opened on this channel. Below the 8, several hundred servitors, listed out by name, in a book that claims a man can compel every one of them once the angel has signed off on him. That second rank is worth a second look, because 4 of those 8 are not Abramelin's invention. Orions, Paimon, Araton, and Amaimon are the 4 spirits the medieval necromancers' manuals pinned to the 4 points of the compass, 1 to a quarter. They were already circulating in the working manuscripts of the 15th century. They are in the conjuring texts. They are in the handbooks men actually used. And here they are again, sitting inside a hierarchy that says it came from an Egyptian in the desert. That is either a German writer borrowing a set of names every practitioner already knew, or it is evidence that the old man on the Nile was working from the same tradition. Both readings are available. Only one of them requires the old man to have existed. And what the book says happens next is worth hearing, because it is not what people assume. There is no bargain in it. No soul changes hands. The princes are called up, made to swear, and then put to work, and each one hands over a set of servants who stay with the man for the rest of his life. The angel is the authority. The princes are the labor. That is not a pact. That is hiring. And that difference is the whole reason the men who copied this book could think of it as devotion rather than crime. Book 4 is the squares, hundreds of them, grids of letters, ruled and lettered, each one labelled with what it is for: to know things past and things to come, to find treasure and to keep it, to walk on water, to fly, to go unseen, to bring the dead back for a short while, to make somebody love you. That is a shopping list, and the shopping list is why this book gets remembered as a spell book by people who have never opened it. A word square is an old trick, and it is not an occult one. Letters are laid into a grid, so the same words read across and down, and the most famous surviving example is scratched into a wall at Pompeii, which means Romans were doing it for amusement while the empire was still standing. The form got taken up by magical writers because a text that reads in more than one direction feels like it is holding something back. That Latin square deserves its own episode, and it is going to get one. Close the tangent there and come back. Because the squares are also where the damage is. In the English edition, a great many of them are not finished. Cells sit blank. Rows come up short. The book hands you the label and then does not hand you the letters. For a century, the standard English answer to that was that the squares had been corrupted, or lost, or deliberately withheld from the unworthy. There is a flatter answer. It is the correct one, and it has been sitting in Germany the whole time. So start with what physically exists, because the list is short and anybody can check it. There is no 15th century Abramelin. There is no 16th century Abramelin either. The oldest copies of this book that exist anywhere are German manuscripts, and the earliest of them carries the year 1608. There are more of them at Dresden. There is a German printing made at Cologne in 1725, which is the moment the text stops being a thing you have to know somebody to see. And there is the French copy, made in the 1700s, in the Arsenal Library in Paris. That is the entire physical inheritance, a handful of objects, in 3 cities, and not one of them older than the 17th century. Line those up, and the shape of the tradition is obvious. This book lives in German. Every early witness to it is in German. The French copy is a translation, made late, at the end of the chain, rather than anywhere near the start of it. Now put the date on the title page against that, 1458. The oldest object anybody can hold is 150 years younger. That gap does not prove a forgery, and anybody who tells you it does is skipping a step. Plenty of medieval books survive only in copies made centuries afterwards, and 150 years is not a scandalous interval for something that was never printed for the open market. What the gap does mean is that 1458 is a claim in the book, not a fact about the book. Every sentence ever written about Abraham of Worms rests on his own word for it. Then there is Easter, and the Hebrew in it, which some scholars read as the Hebrew of a man working from a dictionary rather than a man who thought in the language. Put those together and you get a serious case for a 17th century German author writing in the voice of a 15th century Jew, because in that century, for this kind of book, that voice was worth money. Others hold that a genuine 15th century core is sitting underneath the German copies, and that the copies simply lost the older layer. Nobody has closed it. Anybody who tells you this book is definitely medieval, or definitely a fake, has picked a side in an argument that is still running. There is a duller question underneath that one, and it is the more useful of the two. Why did nobody line the copies up? The answer is not a cover-up. It is geography and language. The manuscripts were in German libraries, and the people who cared most about this book were reading it in English, in London and New York, and had no reason on earth to suspect that the version in their hands was missing a year. A book does not announce that it is short. It reads perfectly well. You only find the missing 12 months by putting 2 copies side by side, and for 100 years almost nobody who wanted to had both languages, and almost nobody who had both languages wanted to. One more thing about that 72, before it gets away. 72 poor people in Arachi. 72 demons in the Ars Goetia. 72 names of God, counted out of 3 verses of Exodus chapter 14, by writers who noticed that each of the 3 has exactly 72 letters in it. The number is everywhere in this literature, and it moves between books that otherwise have nothing to do with each other. It may be a habit of mind, it may be borrowing. Nobody can currently tell the two apart, which is less satisfying than a secret, and truer. And this book is not a freak, it belongs to a family. There is an older tradition in Latin that runs on exactly this bargain. One enormous act of devotion, correctly performed, in exchange for a thing that cannot normally be got. The Ars Notoria, from the 13th century, promised the whole of the liberal arts, grammar and rhetoric and geometry and the rest, to a man who would pray over a set of figures for a set number of days. Thomas Aquinas condemned it by name. Around 1300, a French monk called John of Morigny used it, wrote his own version of it, and had his book burned at Paris in 1323. Abramelin is that same bargain with the prize changed, not the liberal arts. An angel, and after the angel, everything else. So how does a German book that almost nobody outside a few libraries had read become the foundation of modern Western magic? One man, one city, one copy. Samuel Liddell Mathers. English, born in Hackney, self-styled MacGregor after a Scottish line he had no claim to, and by the 1890s, one of the chiefs of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. That order needs a moment, because everything downstream runs through it. Founded in London in 1888, it took in W. B. Yeats, the horror writer Arthur Machen, and the actress Florence Farr. It is the single most consequential occult society the English-speaking world has produced. Almost everything that came afterwards came out of it. Mathers had already put the Key of Solomon into English. He would put the Goetia into English with a young man named Aleister Crowley. And in 1892 he moved to Paris. That is the whole accident. The German manuscripts sat in German libraries, and he did not go to them. The French copy sat in a library in the city he was living in. He worked from the one he could walk to. If he had spent a single summer in Germany instead, everything after him would look different. He did not. In 1898 he published it in London, under a title worth hearing in full, because the confidence in it is the thing that travelled. The Book of the Sacred Magic of Abramelin the Mage, as delivered by Abraham the Jew unto his son Lamech, A.D. 1458. Not attributed to, not according to, delivered by, with a date attached, printed as a fact on the front of the book. Now the 6 and the 18. In the German manuscripts the operation runs 18 months, 3 stages, 6 months each. In the French copy Mathers was translating, those same 3 stages run 2 months each, 6 months in total. A year has gone missing somewhere between the German and the French, and the man printing the English had no way of seeing it, because he had one witness in front of him. A single copy never contradicts itself. Then the squares. In the German copies the grids are filled. The letters are all there. The holes in the English edition are holes in the French copy, not holes in the book. That is the reversal, and it is worth saying flatly. The standard English Abramelin, the one that has sat on every serious occultist's shelf since 1898, is a translation of the worst surviving witness to the text. So what did 125 years of magicians actually take out of this book? Not the squares, not the 4 princes, not the treasure. The Golden Dawn took one phrase out of this book and made it the summit of the entire system. One phrase, the knowledge and conversation of the holy guardian angel, became the thing every grade in every order descended from that one was pointed at, and in orders that exist today, it is still the thing a member is working toward. Look at where they put it on the ladder. These societies run on grades, and the grades are a staircase. The lower ones are study. Somewhere in the middle, there is a step where a member stops being a student and is called an adept, and that step is the one they hung this phrase on. Not the end of the climb, the door in the middle of it, the one you cannot go past without it. Every book of the last century that talks about attaining the holy guardian angel is talking about a door that a Victorian in Paris put there. He chose the words himself, working from a French copy of a German book. And almost everybody who says it has the second word wrong. Conversation, in the English Mathers was writing in, did not mean talking. It carried the older sense, the one the King James Bible uses. Philippians chapter 1, verse 27. Let your conversation be as it becometh the gospel of Christ. That is not advice about your speech. It is about how a life is conducted. Conversation meant the whole manner of living, the company kept, the way a person carries themselves from one day to the next. So the knowledge and conversation of the holy guardian angel was never a chat with an angel. So it is two things, not one. Knowing the thing and then living beside it afterwards. The operation is 6 months, or 18, of the second one. Now the house. Aleister Crowley joined the Golden Dawn in 1898, the year the translation appeared, and he read it the way a young man reads a book that has just landed. He did not want to study it, he wanted to do it. But the conditions are the conditions. A door facing north, an open terrace beyond the window, river sand laid across the terrace floor. None of that is available in rented rooms in London. So in 1899 he bought a house. Boleskine House, on the southeast shore of Loch Ness, near Foyers. Bought for the operation and for nothing else. He had the terrace prepared. He began. And in 1900 he stopped. The Golden Dawn had gone to war with itself. Mathers, in Paris, was losing control of the London Temple, and he sent the newest and least popular member of the order to take the rooms back for him. What happened at Blythe Road in Hammersmith that April is the least dignified afternoon in the history of English occultism. Crowley, who was 24, turned up to seize the premises in a mask. The London members held the door against him. A constable was involved. So were the courts, eventually. And W.B. Yeats, who would win a Nobel Prize in Literature 23 years later, spent part of that spring guarding a rented room in West London against him. Meanwhile, 400 miles north, a terrace of river sand sat unswept. The man who translated the book pulled the man attempting it out of the room before it was finished, in a book that says an unfinished operation is the worst outcome available. And the operation he walked away from was the short one. Crowley gave up on 6 months. The text he was holding had been written for 18, and he had no way of knowing that, because the man who had handed him the book did not know it either. Crowley never went back and finished it there. He placed his attainment somewhere else in the end, years later and thousands of miles away. Then he spent the rest of his life building a religion around the angel he said he met. His own account of Boleskine afterwards is that the thing did not simply stop when he walked out of it. He wrote that the lodge keeper, a man who had not touched a drink in 20 years, went on a binge and had to be kept away from his own family. He wrote that the house filled with shadows in broad daylight, read that as a man explaining his own bad luck, or read it as the book being right about what happens to people who stop. Both readings have been popular for a century. The house went on being famous long after he was dead. The guitarist from Led Zeppelin bought it in 1970 and held it for 22 years. It burned in December 2015. It burned again in 2019. A charity owns the shell now and is putting the roof back on. It is a house above a loch, on a public road in the Highlands, and its history is a matter of public record rather than of rumour. And there is one more thing to account for, and it is on a shelf. The book gives a recipe for an anointing oil, copied out of the Book of Exodus. Myrrh, cinnamon, a root, and olive oil. The root in the English edition is galangal. The root in Exodus, chapter 30, is calamus. That is Mathers's French copy again, turning up in a bottle. There is a bottle labelled Abramelin oil on the shelf of an occult shop in most cities in the English-speaking world, and it is made to the short version, which is the pattern, and it is not unique to this book. The historian Owen Davies, who wrote the standard history of magic books, keeps finding the same shape. A grimoire stops being a working manuscript the moment it becomes a printed object. From then on, it sells on its reputation rather than its contents. The Abramelin oil is that in miniature. Almost nobody buying it has read the 4 books. The bottle is the book now. Which brings the last date, and it is recent. In 2006, an English translation of the German tradition finally appeared, made by Stephen Guth from an edition Georg Dean had assembled out of the German manuscripts and the Cologne printing. 18 months, the squares filled in, a book measurably fuller than the one the previous century had been working from. And the tradition did not move. Nobody went back, ran the operation at 18 months, and published the difference. No order rewrote its papers. The 6-month version is still the one in the manuals, still the one in the histories of the Golden Dawn, still what people mean when they say they are doing the Abramelin. A correction arrived, was noted, and was quietly ignored. That is worth a moment, because it tells you what the book was actually being used for, and it was not accuracy. A tradition is not a text. The 18 months has the manuscripts behind it. The 6 months has a century of people behind it. And those are two different kinds of authority. Dane went further than the manuscripts, and this is where the ground gets soft. He argued that Abraham of Worms was a real man with a real career, and he put a name to him, Jacob ben Moses Moelin, a rabbi of Mainz who died in 1427 and who is a serious figure in Jewish legal history, remembered for his rulings and his liturgy rather than for anything resembling this. Most scholars have not accepted the match. It is a genuine argument, it has not carried the field, and an episode that told you it was settled would be lying to you. What is not settled is a long list. Which German manuscript sits closest to whatever the original was? Whether the French copy shortened the operation or preserved a different tradition that was always 6 months? Whether there is a 15th century layer underneath any of it? Those manuscripts are in named libraries in Germany, catalogued and available, and the work of comparing them properly against each other has still not been done. That is a real open problem, not a mystery, and it is the kind of thing a patient person with good German could actually settle. So, back to the page with the holes in it. In the German copies, those cells are filled. Every letter is where it belongs. The square that finds buried treasure is complete, and it has been complete the whole time, in a library in Germany, and it has changed nothing at all, because nobody was ever using it to find treasure. What this book gave the modern world was never a spell, it was a shape. A long stretch of solitude, in a room somebody has prepared, with a promise waiting at the end of it. 6 months or 18, the shape is identical, and the only difference between the two numbers is how much of a life is being asked for. A finished book is a set of instructions. A book with gaps in it is an invitation. Mathers printed the gaps by accident, and the accident is why 100 years of people picked it up and poured themselves into it. A single copy never contradicts itself. For 108 years, there was only one. One thing has changed, and it changed in 2006. For the whole of the tradition's history, there was only one Abramelin available in English, so nobody was choosing it. They were inheriting it. Both versions are now on the same shelf in the same language, side by side, 6 months and 18. Anybody who picks this book up from here on is making a decision that Mathers never got to make, and neither did Crowley, and neither did anybody in between them. Tell me in the comments whether the 18-month version ought to be the one everybody uses now, or whether the 6-month one has earned its place by being the one that actually got done. And if you want the other great grimoire opened properly, all 5 books of the Lesser Key of Solomon and what is genuinely written in each one, that one is on this channel already. Make sure to subscribe to the Heretic Codex.